Welcome to Devotionary, where we make the Bible accessible and applicable. We've already seen how David struggled with indecision. He had a flaw in his internal wiring that kept him from dealing promptly and forcefully when faced with important decisions. And in 1 Kings chapter 1, verses 11 through 27, David finds himself facing yet another son who is trying to take over his kingdom. This time, it's Adonijah, who is following the script used by his deceased brother, Absalom. Adonijah has already recruited some of David's key advisors and royal administrators in the hopes of winning their support in his quest to follow David as the king of Israel. Solomon was to be God's appointed successor to the throne, but Adonijah was unwilling to accept that outcome. So David was faced with yet another important decision to make. All eyes were on him. The future of his kingdom was at stake. What would he do? How would he respond? David was old and bedridden. His days on this earth were numbered, and once again one of his sons was plotting to take his kingdom from him. When David should have been enjoying his final days in peace and quiet, he was suddenly confronted with yet another looming disaster. Until he breathed his final breath, David was still the king of Israel, and must deal with the situation facing his kingdom and protect the right of his son Solomon to rule in his place. But the only problem was that David knew nothing about what was going on. He was oblivious to the danger facing the kingdom. He was safely ensconced in his bed within his royal chamber, being cared for by Abishag the Shunammite. He was completely unaware of the actions of Adonijah, Abiathar, and Joab. But Nathan the prophet was on top of all that was going on, and sent Bathsheba, David's wife and the mother of Solomon, to inform him of the gravity of the situation. One of the problems was that David had made no preparations for his succession. It would appear that Adonijah, as the oldest living son, his three older siblings had all died, assumed that he was the legitimate heir to the throne. He was simply taking advantage of David's old age and speeding up the transition process. But God had clearly told David that Solomon would be his successor. But you will have a son who will be a man of peace. I will give him peace with his enemies and all the surrounding lands. His name will be Solomon, and I will give peace and quiet to Israel during his reign. He is the one who will build a temple to honor my name. He will be my son, and I will be his father, and I will secure the throne of his kingdom over Israel forever. 1 Chronicles 22, verses 9 through 10. And yet, it seems that David had done nothing to ensure that the transition of power to Solomon would take place. Once again, his inaction had produced some very negative consequences, and could even result in the death of Solomon, should Adonijah's coup succeed. So Nathan sent Bathsheba to David, encouraging her to prompt him to take action, and she did just that. She not only informed him of what was going on, but warned him that all the eyes of Israel were on him. He was being watched, and the people were waiting to see what he would do. Despite his old age, David was going to have to take action. What he did next was going to secure the future of his kingdom and that of his son, or seal the fate of Solomon. Nathan saw the gravity of the situation and told Bathsheba, "Let me give you advice, that you may save your own life and the life of your son Solomon." 1 Kings 1, verse 12. He knew there was no time to waste. Something had to be done, and David was the one who had to do it. But he would need prompting and support. So Bathsheba's job was to bring David up to speed and to beg him to do something about the situation. Then Nathan was to come in and corroborate her story and provide much-needed counsel to David. He was also to act as a second witness to anything David decreed in their presence. Bathsheba was blunt with David. This was not a time for pleasantries and politeness. She knew that her son's life was in danger. She even reminded David, "If you do not act, my son Solomon and I will be treated as criminals as soon as my lord the king has died." 1 Kings 1, verse 21. And she was not going to leave David's side until he took action. So she boldly challenged him, saying, "And now, my lord the king, all Israel is waiting for you to announce who will become king after you." 1 Kings 1, verse 20. There was no time to waste. Inaction was not an option. And just as planned, Nathan followed Bathsheba into the king's presence, confirming her words and challenging David to do something about this dire situation. The entire nation was waiting on pins and needles, wondering what David would do. A line had been drawn in the sand. Sides had been chosen. Adonijah had put together his team and secured what he thought to be his future. The only one who was conspicuously absent from this whole affair was Solomon himself. He had not been invited to Adonijah's feast with all their brothers, for obvious reasons. But he was also not present when Bathsheba and Nathan met with David. His fate was in their hands. His future and that of his kingdom were completely in the hands of his father. He would have to trust that his father would do the right thing. Solomon was at the mercy of David. He doesn't appear anywhere in the passage. He doesn't show up, begging David to keep his word and give him the kingdom God had promised him. Perhaps Solomon was not aware of the word that God had spoken to David. But we'll see in the next part of this chapter that Bathsheba did know, and it's doubtful that she kept this news from Solomon. He most likely knew that he was the God-appointed successor to the throne, but he was not demanding his rights or whining about his fate. He had to have known what Adonijah was up to, and that all of his brothers were at the feast, enjoying Adonijah's hospitality and shouting along with all the other guests, "Long live King Adonijah." 1 Kings 1, verse 25. But Solomon simply waited in the wings. Like all the rest of the people of Israel, his eyes were on David. What would he do? How would he respond? So often we can find ourselves in similar, if not so dire, circumstances. We can come to a place where a decision is required, an important, potentially life-altering decision, and others are watching us to see what we will do. Perhaps our family is waiting on us to act, wondering how we'll respond. Maybe our coworkers are anxiously watching to see how we'll handle a difficult situation in the workplace. There are always others watching us, depending on us to do the right thing, to make the right decision, and to give them peace and confidence that we can be trusted. Even the world is watching us. The Church of Jesus Christ is to be salt and light in the midst of all the decay and darkness surrounding it. As the secular world presses in, and the enemy continues his assault on the will and the ways of God, the world is watching to see how the church will respond. Will we do nothing? Will we be marked by inaction and complacency? Are we confident enough in the Word of God that we will boldly take our stand against all the forces lined up against us? What David did next was a matter of life and death. The future of his kingdom and that of his son were at stake. All eyes were on him. What would he do? But what about us? The world is watching and waiting to see what we will do.